Uh, Hello and good evening. My name is Rajiv Shah. I am from RBSA Advisors. I lead the firm's financial advisory practice as a managing director. With me, we have a very illustrious guest, Mr. Nitin, the Group CFO of Zydus Cadila Group. We have invited him to hear his thoughts and have a very frank conversation with him about how he sees the future of pharmaceutical industry. Um, I have had the privilege of working with him personally on a few transactions. Uh, the recent Heinz portfolio acquisition or their demerger of their animal health business. But he's a very thorough professional. And if I look at his CV, I mean, it is a CV to be proud of. And if I'll love to give you a very brief introduction of Mr. Parekh. Mr. Parekh is the group CFO of Cadila Healthcare and the Zydus Cadila Group. It is India's fourth largest pharmaceutical company with an annual top line of about 14,000 crores. Mr. Parekh leads the finance, technology, and legal function across the group. When I look at his qualifications, probably include everything that anyone can aspire for. He's an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, a chartered accountant, a CFA, an MBA in pharmaceutical management. And on top of that, he also has he's a law professional as well. He's a very active speaker on various speaking circuits. He regularly speaks across all IIMs as a guest faculty at IIM Ahmedabad, IIM Udaipur, at the Economic Times various summits, at the Chartered Accountants Institute. He has received various accolades, which include Leaders of Excellence Award for 2020. He has been adjudged amongst the top 100 CFOs of India consecutively for the last 8 years. And he's a thought leader in himself. I think we have the privilege of having him with us today. The format of this conversation would be, we will request him to make a presentation about his thoughts. That may be about half an hour. And thereafter, we will have about half an hour of questions and answers. I must request and caution all my audience here that being a leading CFO of a listed company, we have certain legal obligations. Zydus is undergoing a cooling period during this time, so Mr. Parekh may have to be conscious of the fact that he will not be in a position to discuss or comment upon any price-sensitive information, and therefore his comments may be a little guarded. We'll have to give him that leeway, given his position. But I think we must be very thankful that he has taken time off to speak to us. With this a very brief introduction, I will request Mr. Parekh to present his thoughts. So thank you very much. It's a privilege to have you with us.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you, Rajiv Bhai and RBSA Advisors for inviting me for this talk of interest because of what's happening in the recent past in terms of pharmaceutical industry and various moves by pharmaceutical industry in terms of COVID treatment and vaccines. I think it's the most important, most ideal time to talk about future of pharma industry. With that, let me begin with my formal presentation. So in terms of the emerging trends within pharmaceutical industry, as you know, India is the largest provider of generic drug globally in terms of various specific items. For example, when it comes to contribution in terms of specifics, in terms of the items, we contribute about 50% of the global demand for various vaccines. 40% of the demand for US, 25% of all medicines in UK, over 80% of the drugs to combat AIDS are supplied by Indian pharmaceutical sector. And we wish that because many Indian companies, including Zydus, are working on vaccine development for COVID-19, we wish that India's contribution in terms of vaccine for COVID also remains sizable to reckon with. If I talk of domestic market size and growth prospects, Indian pharmaceutical industry is expected to touch about $100 billion, and medical device market expected to reach $25 billion by 2025, which is a sizable growth, by any standard. If I talk of the current market size and growth, India's domestic pharmaceutical market turnover, it reached about 1.4 lakh crore in 2019, which is about 20.03 billion, and growing at 9.8% year on year from 1.2 lakh crores in 2018. In March 2020, on moving annual total basis, that's a MAT basis, pharma industry growth was at 10.8%. This is for the March MAT. If I talk of trends in medicinal spend, medicine spending in India is projected to grow from 9 to 12% over next 5 years, leading India to become one of the top 10 countries in terms of the medicine spending, which is a good growth in terms of world records. However, though not comparable to many developed countries, I think as a developing country, the increasing trend in terms of medicine spend is going to augur well for pharmaceutical industry too. If I talk about the recent numbers, the chart on the left side talks about industry growth on trailing 12 months basis, which shows that there is a robust growth of about 10 to 11% on year-on-year basis, except when you look at this April 2020 number of MAT, which is 8.6% growth. As you all know that there is a significant impact of COVID, though much less than all other industries. So year-on-year basis in the month of April 20 compared to April 19, there is a 14% degrowth in Indian pharmaceutical industry, and that is getting reflected in terms of slippage from 10.8% on MAT basis till March 20 to 8.6% in April 20. But when you look at the focus of many Indian companies, the focus remains on India apart from other countries. So India remains a very prominent market for many of us, and that include Cadila also, apart from other companies, where about 40% plus is the composition of sales from India market. When you look at the composition of growth drivers in Indian pharma market, on a MAT April 2020 basis, if you see, as we saw 8.6% growth, which has impact of COVID also. But if you look at the growth on MAT basis, the price-led growth is about 5% out of 8.6%. 2.8% comes from the new launches, and 0.7% comes from volume. So you find that there is a recent phenomenon where the growth in terms of volume has been lower compared to what it used to be. For example, if you look at MAT data April 2019, then there was 3.4% growth which was coming out of volume, which is slipped little bit. But I think this is a temporary phenomenon, and we soon would be back to good growth in near future. While I talked about 8.6% growth, and that was on basis of April MAT, here you have the data which are from top 20 companies in terms of Indian pharmaceutical industry. Whereas at IPM level, Indian pharmaceutical market, you find 7.8% growth, consisting of 0.2% volume, 5.3% on price, and 2.3% in terms of new products. But look at the composition coming from different companies, and you find a lot of variation or variety in terms of different levers working for different companies. So if you look at the volume growth part, then you find that in this 20 list, Abbott has minus 2.3% volume growth, whereas Aristo has 14.5% growth. Similarly, when you look at the price part, 3.9% for Aristo, which is amongst the lowest in 20 companies. Dr. Reddy has 7.4% price-led growth. And when it comes to new product, GSK happens to be lowest in this list with only 0.4% coming out from new products, and Glenmark leads the pack with 4.8%. And when you look at Zydus, it's quite a balanced one, in the 10% growth bucket. So different companies have used different levers. Some are by choice, some are because of various other factors that has led to different composition of growth for different pharma companies. What's the advantage in terms of Indian pharma? This is slide taken from EY's very recent report, and it shows that India has excellent proven track record in R&D. If you look at 2019 numbers, there are 837 total US FDA approvals, of which 336 came from India, so which is roughly about 40%. And you find a similar kind of almost trend from 2017, 18, and 19, where about 35 to 40% of approvals given by US FDA are for Indian players, which means that apart from the Indian industry, the Indian companies are also doing very well in terms of generic business in US, which is the largest pharma market. When you also look at the highest number of FDA approved plants outside India, India is the second highest plant approved by FDA. And also there is a lot of opportunity in terms of drug discovery outsourcing, where India is expected to do much better compared to many other industries, many other countries which are shown in the chart here. So from different angles, I think India offers a very good opportunity in terms of pharmaceutical industry. Outsourcing, where India is expected to do much better compared to many other industry or many other countries which are shown in the chart here. So from different angles, I think India offers opportunity in terms of.
Can I request, if no questions, maybe we can take after the session. If we can take the questions later on, and if I can request the administrator to put the other participants on mute for a while, please. Let the presentation from Mr. Parekh get over, and then we'll come to question and answers. Thank you.
Thank you. So what's future of Indian pharmaceutical industry? Again, this is the report from IQVIA, IOCD, Pharmaceutical, IPA team, etc., and also secondary research. We says that Indian pharma industry could grow to USD 120 to 130 billion by 2030. And there are two scenarios which are drawn here. If it comes from 7 to 8%, then it will reach 80 to 90 billion dollars, and with expectation of 11 to 12%, it can reach 120 to 130 billion dollars. Important is, what are the drivers which can possibly make this growth happen? Four important drivers are mentioned here. The first is the accelerated growth in India, driven by increased accessibility and affordability. You are aware about various programs of Government of India, also including Jan Aushadhi, which helping government in terms of making the medicines affordable to people at mass level. You're also aware about many products being essential medicines coming under price control in last 2-3 years, which has also made many drugs, especially for chronic segment, available at very affordable prices to the patients. The second is potential breakthrough in next generation innovative products. There are companies including Zydus who are working on next generation products and NC products. Zydus has also very exciting NCE product pipeline. We are the first Indian company to come out with own research product, and which is launched in India in the name of Lipaglyn. Strong growth in the US market by driving higher ANDA share in molecules going off patent and potential ease in price erosion. As we saw in the previous slide, Indian players have been garnering about 35 to 40% of product approvals. And with GDUFA 2 coming, I think the product approval pace has also increased. Thankfully, we are now again witnessing a single-digit price erosion, which also augurs well in terms of growth. The fourth driver is the increased growth in large under-penetrated markets such as Japan and China. China happens to be very less penetrated, but quite a slow in terms of adoption of generics, and that extent relatively difficult market. Many companies very recently, last 12 months, had talked about doing some kind of business in China, including joint ventures in China. But I think in the current circumstances, the pace may get slowed down or companies may revisit their plans. Talking about FMCG industry, as you know, Zydus Wellness Limited, our subsidiary company, is a FMCG segment and doing extremely well. What are the prospects there? So fast-moving consumer goods industry is the fourth largest sector in Indian economy, and the retail market in India is estimated to reach 1.1 trillion by 2020, which is the current year, from USD 840 billion in 2017, which means about 10% CAGR. And in terms of contribution of modern trade, it is expecting to grow at 20% to 25% per annum. We also seen online FMCG market, which is forecasted to reach $45 billion in 2020 from $20 billion in 2017. Some of these numbers and data have been taken from India Brand Equity Foundation. Advantage India, as I talked about Advantage India for pharma, this Advantage India for FMCG. So again, it's a growing demand. India's contribution to global consumption is also expected to, grow up. There is a rise in rural consumption, which is also going to drive the FMCG market and also contribute to the spending. There are attractive opportunities in terms of increasing the disposable income in the rural area. Also, this is aided by certain policy support from government, like food security bill and a direct cash transfer of subsidies in the bank accounts of households. Investment approval up to 100% of foreign equity in single brand retail and 51% in multi-brand retail. This also works well for the FMCG industry. The fourth is the high investments. Investment in these sector attracts investors as the FMCG products have demand throughout the year. So there may be some seasonality for certain products, but this holds true in majority of the cases. The sector witnessed healthy FDI inflows of USD 15.94 billion during the period December 19 to April 20. So there is a lot of interest which even foreign investors have in Indian FMCG industry. Talking about the growth drivers for FMCG industry, as you can see, they are 2018 and 2019 numbers. So far as the volume and value part are concerned, you can again see that there is some pressure of a recent time which is witnessed in terms of volume growth. I believe this is also more of a temporary nature. This may remain little subdued in the wake of COVID-19 situation for maybe a quarter or so, but I think that the Indian FMCG industry is here to stay and grow, and always is going to remain very attractive opportunity. Other topic which is quite hotly debated, talked about these days is can we become self-reliant in API? Let me first talk about the industry level. So India is a strong player in the API ecosystem globally. India's API industry is ranked the third largest in the world. So it's a force to reckon with. India contributes approximately 57% of the APIs to pre-qualified list of WHO. However, of late, the reliance on China has grown significantly. For example, in FY19, India's imports were about 25,000 crore rupees in terms of bulk drugs, compared to just about 19,000 crores in FY18. And imports from China have been steadily on rise. So from 62% in FY12 to 68% of the imports in FY19. That's the contribution of China in API imports. So obviously there is a high import dependency on a single nation, and that is a matter of little concern for all stakeholders, including government. Especially, in the situation like this, I think this comes obviously under more, attention radar. And it's also talked about that from the industry angle, from the raw material side, the price hike and margin, angle, as well as the end consumer angle, whether the drug shortage can be created, whether there's spurious drugs can come. These are all valid concerns, and I think government also suitably addressed them. The recommendations which have been very recently made in CII KPMG report on Indian API industry reaching the full potential is April 2020 report. And the report talks about four important pillars. The first is improve ease of doing business in India. Now, my take on this is that India has done a reasonable progress in terms of ease of doing business. World Bank's 2020 report talks that India now ranks at 68th position, which is a jump of 10 ranks just in 1 year. Talking about incentives and subsidies, I think government has come out with a scheme, and I will be talking about that in my next slide. So government has duly recognized and to the extent implemented this report recommendation, coming out with a scheme, and government has been very fast in terms of acting on such recommendations. Third, talking about the infrastructure development, as you know, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has already announced somewhere in February 2020 only for outlays of 102 lakh crores till 2025 on infrastructure development. So these three pillars are largely getting addressed. The fourth is on in terms of innovation and capability development. Essentially, some more efforts are required, and government also needs to give encouragement to R&D by bringing back 200% weighted deduction for research and development spend. This is the snapshot of a recent announcement in March by Government of India in terms of incentive scheme for APIs, KSMs, intermediates, and also talking about establishment of parks. So total benefit of rupees 9,940 crores is envisaged. There are different APIs, KSMs, and drug intermediates considered for this. Idea is not here to give those details, but idea is that if you look at the chart, it shows that there are 4 fermentation-based KSMs or DIs, which are selected, and there are another 10 also fermentation-based niche KSM selected. There are 4 chemical synthesis-based KSM selected, 23 chemical synthesis-based KSM selected. Depending on the specific product and its significance to the country, there are different incentives, prescribed. There are also minimum threshold limits of investments prescribed, which you can see in the table, and the number of beneficiaries who would be in a position to avail this. So you find this production link incentive scheme, 6,940 crore is the outlay, and 136 beneficiaries are expected to gain out of this. And the government has also come out with the proposal of establishing 2 bulk drug parks and 1 intermediate park, where 1,000 crore rupees of amount or 70% of project cost, whichever is less, is talked about. So government is mentally prepared for 3,000 crore rupees to be given in terms of help for 3 parks. So that aggregates 6,940 crores plus 3,000 crores as 9,940 crores. So it's a very welcome feature, I think, and this would help the industry in terms of becoming self-reliant to some extent. There's also impact of deglobalization talked about these days, but this is not a recent phenomenon. I believe that of late, in last couple of years, it is seen that the global trade volume measured as a percentage to global GDP has been relatively stagnant. This is a chart which is a Statistica chart, but based on World Bank numbers, which says that now it's about roughly little less than 60% is the ratio of global trade as a percentage to global GDP. So while it has grown, if you can see in the chart from 1970 to little less than 30%, over 60%, it's a good growth that way. But of late, it is finding now stagnancy, and the reason for this is that there is in re-emergence of nationalization and protection from many countries. In today's time, people have also been talking about the vulnerabilities in terms of global supply chain, both for the pandemic and as well as there is a talk about this trade war between US and China, that whether this can lead to more of domestic sourcing and can that result into reduction in global trade. But I personally believe that there is not going to be much impact of this because both economics and self-reliance need to be balanced properly. So whether in the light of possible nationalist kind of views and shift of manufacturing facilities from China to other countries, whether India can gain out of this. So these are the key strengths which make sense for many multinational companies to really look at India as a very attractive location, because already a major global player. We are the third largest in terms of volume terms and 10th largest at value terms globally. We have strong value chain capabilities starting from the research, development, manufacturing, branding, and also global supplies. We have presence in multiple pharma verticals like oral solids, injectables, biosimilars, vaccines. We have relatively low cost of production. The cost of manufacturing formulation in India remains 30 to 40% lower than other comparative manufacturing hubs such as China and Eastern Europe, notwithstanding the low productivity levels. And this is based on McKinsey's proprietary, POGOS benchmarking. So despite the inflationary trends, India's labor cost advantage will sustain in the medium to long term. I think this is again based on the FICCI's report. What it means that yes, India remains a location to aspire for many multinational companies if they are looking at relocating their manufacturing facilities. Process capabilities and scale economy is also important advantages which India has. We also have excellent reverse engineering, chemical synthesis skills, and economies of scale. And as I mentioned earlier, we are convergent with the international market approvals. Apart from US FDA, we have approvals of our plants and products from EMA, that is the European Health Agency, MHRA of UK, or ANVISA of Brazil. So we are, yes, quite convergent in terms of regulatory environment and requirements of the world markets. There has been a talk whether the current situation is likely to lead to more M&A deals, more PE deals, and whether we are going ahead with consolidation of pharmaceutical industry. Some of the recent deals, which obviously you will be aware of, November 2019, we had Bharat Serum deal where Advantage taken a majority stake. The valuation was 3,500 crores. And it is talked that time, as reported in Mint, that many private equity funds are looking at such controlled deals in India, and they want to ensure that they can drive the decisions, improve the profitability, go for governance in these companies. And to some extent, the Indian promoters have also become more willing to cede the control to financial partners to boost the growth. In February 2020, we have seen Wockhardt DRL deal where the domestic market portfolio consisting of 62 brands with sales of 375 crore is sold to Dr. Reddy's for 1,850 crores. And very recent deal happening in May 2020 is the Sequence Animal Health business acquired by Carlyle for $210 million, roughly about 1,580 crores. And that is for 74% of the equity. Along, once you convert into the 100% of equity and also look at the 300 crore of debt, the enterprise value comes to 2,435 crores, which means that the deal is at about 14 times last 12 months EBITDA. So the questions which come now is that, do we expect many more M&A deals in pharma segment? I personally think yes, we can expect, but I don't think this is the result of COVID. There have been M&A deals in pharma all throughout in the past, and that trend would continue. Talking about, are PE firms likely to take lion's share in such M&A deals? Possibly yes. And some of the reasons which come to my mind are, one, relatively compared to Indian players, the PE funds have relatively large surplus funds available and also hunger for growth. Secondly, there have been very many deals in the past where private equity funds have made a lot of returns in the past deals, and therefore they find that Indian pharma sector remains very attractive segment for them to get engaged in the M&A deals. Third, do such M&A deals signal possible consolidation of pharma industry? My view is not, because while M&A deals keep happening in pharma industry for various reasons, I don't think it is leading to any consolidation, in the sense that while it is a fragmented market, it would possibly remain fragmented market in India. Talking about FMCG, and Rajiv talked about our Heinz acquisition, and it was very good and happy working with Rajiv and his team on this matter in terms of valuation. So first of all, Zydus has a presence in FMCG sector even prior to acquisition of Heinz portfolio, which you would be aware of. The Heinz acquisition has a strategic rationale to increase the scale and create a basket of textbook brands. Heinz was in our target if available even prior to the process of sale commenced. It was possibly our management dream, that if this target becomes available, we would be happy to get engaged in that. And interestingly, Zydus was not invited initially for the bidding. In fact, we approached the investment banker and said that we are interested. This was also natural in a way, because with about 550 crore kind of turnover and a similar kind of surplus cash balance, to talk about 4,600 kind of deal, the investment bankers initially thought that may not work, but we were excited and therefore we approached, and fortunately we became the winner ultimately in this deal. And the acquisition synergies are getting realized as per the plan. And talking about this strategic intent in some more detail, so this for Zydus Wellness is a leapfrogging into becoming a leading consumer wellness company. Now the combined turnover with about 1,700 crore rupees. They're iconic brands with more than 50 years of history. There's a good distribution synergy, like footprint to scale up from 2.3 lakh outlets to 4.5 lakh outlets, which are just about the double. And there's a further revenue synergy also through export focus on Heinz brands. Is realizable cost synergies through rationalization of distribution incentives, trade promotion, CFA, and leveraging economies of scale in other support functions too. There's also extensive supply and distribution networks like 800 plus distributors, 17 lakh retailers, 21 warehouses, and 1,000 plus field force, plus 2 manufacturing facilities located in Aligarh and Sitarganj with adequate capacity for growth and for further scalability. And there's a milk collection with 90,000 plus farmers with potential to add more. So it's a very good platform for us to get a future growth. And the key brands, like Glucon-D, almost 60% market share with first market rank, Complan, fourth market rank, 5% market share, Nycil 34% market share, again market rank 1. So if you now combine with sugar-free being #1 brand, Nutralite being #1 brand, and then have Glucon #1 brand, Nycil #1 brand. So it works well in terms of Zydus' own philosophy in terms of the brand building, especially in wellness segment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for that interesting presentations. So we have lots of questions. Some of them I've got through my colleague who is compiling the questions which are thrown. And so thank you very much for this presentation. I really appreciate that. So a lot of questions are being thrown at us, and I believe you would be the best person to answer them. My colleagues are trying to compile them so that they can be properly put to you.
Sure.
Sir, given it is a COVID season, people are asking, and I can put it to you, is Zydus as a group, are we developing any drug or vaccine or making investments in terms of helping in the COVID fight? That is one. And secondly, is COVID impacting Zydus's business as such? Any supply chain disruptions or any demand disruptions? So the two parts to the question that you are witnessing, sir. So we have to hear from this.
Okay. First, talking about treatment or vaccine for COVID, I think you people are aware that Zydus has one of the largest manufacturing capacities for HCQS, which in some of the countries, including India, is still considered as treatment drug amongst many other drugs talked about. While different countries have come out with different research on that, even today we have been getting good orders for HCQS, so that still continues as one important treatment drug. We have been working on other products also which can work for treatment, but currently will not be able to give any more details on that. So far as the vaccines are concerned, as you would be aware that globally there are about 100 different companies working on vaccines. Okay,
Yes.
30 companies from India only, and 7 of them are approved by WHO, including Zydus, in terms of their research and development activity for COVID vaccine. I'm specifically talking about. And different companies are at different stages in terms of development. The development, even on a fast track, normally is 12 to 18 months, but I think currently the government is also taking a very pragmatic approach, whereby they have said that you can even start manufacturing vaccine even when the clinical trials are going on. This is just to save time, which is normally not done. But in today's time, the government has also agreed for this. So we, as Zydus, we are working on 2 different types of vaccines in technical terms. Which one is from India, our state-of-the-art vaccine technology center in Ahmedabad, where we are working on vaccine, and we have another 100% subsidiary in the name of Etna Biotech in Italy. So there also we have a vaccine center, and there also we are working. So as earlier intimated to stock exchange also, we are currently at the stage of animal testing, and then after completing this stage, we'll be able to go for human trials. Whereas at a global level, you may be aware that there are certain companies who have already done on a smaller scale human trials and are now expecting to take up on a larger scale. Like Medira is one company in USA which is expecting to start human trials on about 600 patients in near future. Oxford University is trying to go in for human trials of 800 patients somewhere in September, October this year. So if everything works well, again, it's a guesstimate by different people that somewhere in the mid of 2021 we can get it. There are some optimistic estimates for some of the players who say that by end of 2020 or very early 2021 we can get the vaccine. In terms of supply chain part, which you mentioned about Zydus. So supply chain generally for pharma industry is, I think, quite efficient one. And if you talk of starting with the API as a raw material, India's dependence on API, which I talked about, on China is there. But most large companies, including Zydus, have more than 50% of their APIs coming out from their captive production. And for rest, it's not that only China is the supply agency, but many of us also import APIs from certain European countries, including Italy for that matter.
Correct.
So APIs that way, depending on your product and depending on your own, concentration of different products, you may have different percentage of imports and different percentage of reliance on China for that matter. But China very soon started their operations, including in one, and therefore that is not the issue. Initially, in terms of freight, there was certain issues that freight was little higher than what conventionally we are required to pay. In India, in the light of COVID, for some time there was issue in terms of transportation and some attendance issue also at CADF operation. But I would say that was very quickly, strengthened. Not much issues. We also represented to government to come out with specific circulars saying that a transportation facility for carrying essential drugs is also essential. Because earlier there was a confusion that whereas the pharma is essential, transportation is not essential. We say from where we know the drugs will reach to patients in that case. So I think I must say the government was very fast in terms of responding to all the demands of industry. And very soon, the clarification circulars were issued. So those things were handled very fast. But in India, because of COVID and doctors not operating, their OPD, I think there's some impact which is there in terms of demand, which is very short-term nature. I think once now lockdown gets lifted, those things will get back to stream very fast.
So thank you, sir. So one of a burning, sir, can I first request if you can shut that presentation so that we can see you, maybe if we can, because that presentation, that can be
just
have a larger picture from you.
Okay.
Okay. So just to one of the key concerns about Indian pharmaceutical industry, sir, has been its a lack of investment in what we call new drugs or new chemical entities, sir, which is essentially, I mean, if I give an IT company parlance, I mean, we don't discover the Googles and the Microsofts of the world, but we service them, sir. So that is a question which always people ask. With so much talent available, Indian companies are not investing enough in new research for creating new drugs. And while we are doing a lot of ANDA filings, but essentially those are off patent, which we are trying to serve the generic market. So our margins are very thin. So your take on that, and how do we improve? Is it a valid concern? And your take on that?
So some of the companies, including Zydus, are doing their bit in terms of new chemical entity research. But as you know, that research is always very risky in the sense that you may work on 50, 100 different products, and one or two of them may actually reach the final stage. The resources available with Indian pharma companies would be to that extent limited, because we are not large comparable companies like Pfizer of the world, where hundreds of billions kind of turnover companies may have, and therefore a lot of money at their disposal in terms of investing. And it's like a chicken or egg problem. You are innovator company, and then you have a lot of resources to invest, and then you again get back to another innovative product. So it's a cycle where somewhere you have to reach. As Zydus, we remain committed to become research-based pharma company, and therefore we are working on this NC pipeline. At the same time, there has to be a right policy environment and government support for encouraging research. As I just now mentioned, this R&D benefit which was there, weighted at 200%, then was reduced to 150%, now it is 100%. So whether government really wants pharma companies to make investment in NC and other research and development. Now, as you said, generic development many companies are doing, and if the government first is more in terms of pure research, maybe there will be differential weighted deduction, for a pure research development expenditure and other generic development expenditure. But there has to be a policy framework which actually encourages people to really go for and spend money for research.
But I mean, I understand maybe a policy should push towards investing more in research, but maybe can I also request the mindset of our Indian companies also need to be taking more risk? I mean, these are different. serving a generic market and serving a new chemical entity, new business market are completely different, and probably would require different kind of approach, different kind of investments and mindsets.
Yeah, you are partly right that all the business people don't have the same mindset in terms of going for research. While some of them have, all of them don't have. Therefore, that is also a distinct feature. But at the same time, the cost, Raju bhai, of developing any particular innovative product is huge cost. Running
Yes.
into millions of dollars, and therefore, if you do that, maybe you can't do many other things. So it's always a trade-off and balancing act for many industrialists.
So one other concern, and I'm just is that there is too much dependence in Indian pharmaceutical industry towards a US market or a European market to that extent. And given that many of these markets are having a price erosion, significant price erosion, and our cost is increasing, the earlier alpha which was there, the margin which we were able to enjoy, is getting increasingly difficult. And second is that there is a immense regulatory and compliance pressure. While we have the highest number of US FDA plants outside of US, but now there is a significant compliance pressure on Indian companies. So what's your take on that? So is the market too dependent on US, or and will it continue to stay? That's
So as I had mentioned in my details of Indian pharmaceutical industry and growth, we believe that Indian pharma industry can have maybe 10 to 12% kind of growth going forward. But many companies, including Zydus, may be than that. While the character of India pharma industry remains to some extent fragmented, and therefore there would be entry of many new players also, it is not very easy for companies to get much higher growth unless you look at the exports. And when you look at exports, US happens to be a very large market, and therefore everybody would like to look at US as the market, which is the world's largest market in pharmaceutical, and also very significant market in terms of size, patent expiry, and therefore all of a sudden larger market getting created. It's not very easy, for example, in India to create in 1 year, 2 year time, 100 crore, 200 crores kind of brand. Whereas it is possible to have maybe 25 million, 30 million, 50 million, over 100 million kind of sales of a single product in US. So that is the scale which only US can offer, which in India, will take years. And therefore, it's a market which people cannot ignore. Now, there are challenges like regulatory challenges, many companies, facing regulatory actions. What it means, according to me, is that the US FDA is becoming increasingly conscious in terms of quality requirements, and the stringency is increasing. And Indian companies will have to keep revisiting their people, process, and technology parameters on everyday basis to see that they remain compliant. But that's a market which we cannot ignore. And I think some people, as you rightly mentioned, have done better in terms of US as a market. Some companies have done better in Europe as a market. But apart from India, these are the pockets which allow you to get larger growth and get better scale.
Sir, coming to also that question of that API, sir, I was looking at your presentation and you said 25,000 crores of API were imported this year from China, and there is a significant growth in that. So, sir, it is quite evident that we are dependent on them to some extent. And if there is a disruption there could be a disruption here. And at the same time, the whole environment would, to some extent, we have lost that market share on the API, and what is that we can do to regain that, sir?
So in terms of API, as I mentioned, when the government has come out with this incentive scheme encouraging many companies to look at specific products, the government policy actually talks about specific products, including, let's say, penicillin onwards, many things, where they want India to become self-reliant. So we are also studying those, proposals and would be working on this, what makes sense for Zydus. So similarly, I think many other companies would like to look at this, looking at their own product profile and the kind of dependence that they have in China. Having said so, when it comes to MNCs relocating their manufacturing facilities, let's say in India, and moving from China, I think that would take some time, because one is the physical implementation of project, which depending on project can be 12 to 18 months period, and then there would be approval of plant, and then site transfer or approval of facility products to be filed from that side. So it can be easily 3 year plus kind of journey. Till the time we need to work out in our own manner that whatever API capacity that we have, to what extent we want to reduce the reliance on China based on some debottlenecking operations or increasing the capacity. This I'm talking from Indian manufacturers angle. People who are importing, that whether they can have their own additional capacities in their plants or additional facilities with some machines put, which would then allow them to produce those APIs which are currently imported from China. So it's a journey, but I certainly believe that while there is a current sort of debate in terms of becoming self-reliant and not being dependent on China, especially in the light of what has happened in terms of COVID, but I believe that ultimately it will be good balancing act between the goal of becoming self-reliant and goal of becoming economically viable. It's not a very easy balance. Every company will have to strike their own balance for that.
Sir, this whole talk about we gaining some market share, manufacturing market share, whether it is pharmaceutical or other industries, as though because of the recent issues, the trade shifts away from China. My first question is actually that happening? Is the trade shifting away from China? Because China is up and running and globe is still tottering under COVID. And secondly, will India be a natural beneficiary? That assumption that India will be a natural beneficiary is quite questionable, because there are other players like Vietnam and Indonesia and several other people who want to vie for that space. Sir.
You're right. So first of all, whether the manufacturing is shifting from China to other countries, including Asian countries, is a matter to be still seen. It's in talk. Let's see how it actually works out. And when the facilities, if at all, are to be shifted to other locations, other countries, whether India would have any competitive advantage or not, would depend on product to product. In the sense that which APIs you are talking about, what is the current capacity of those relevant APIs in India, with Indian players, how competent they are. For example, many companies producing API in India, while they're exporting APIs to many countries, including China, US, Europe, they're also selling in India. So many of us buy APIs from other Indian companies also. So it again depends. So if I'm buying from India or I'm buying from Europe, it means that they also need to be competitive or have very critical, source APIs which are otherwise not available from China. So product to product, this analysis has to be done. I think Indian companies would also like to certainly get some share of the shifting of facilities if at all it takes place.
So again, coming to some of the questions relating to the FMCG business that we have, as you from coming from a financial advisory, the valuation which are branded business, whether it is FMCG or even pharmaceutical commands, and even if the sales is less, and the question and the valuation which a generic business commands is very different, sir. So any thoughts that you have to share? Why? I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, there is a huge gap in those valuations.
Rajiv, you are the valuation expert and you are asking me. But my take is that
you actually do deals.
So branded business always, would have a better valuation, because specifically talking about FMCG, it's quite a defensive, industry. And I think that way branded formulation business as well as FMCG have shown how resilient and defensive these industries are. And if you look at the valuations of pharma companies in the recent past, post-COVID, I think the valuations have gone up, which shows a more level of confidence in terms of their ability to deliver. Also, the ability of many companies, including Zydus, in terms of showing the agility that, for example, the government says, can we increase the CQS capacities? Many of us said, yes, we can do it faster. Can you, produce, for example, COVID test that ICMR has given this, to us, to produce COVID testing kits for them? Yes, we can do it. So the ability of an organization to quickly adapt to the situation and make the facilities on a flexible basis available, I think that works well, and it shows the way pharma industry can work. Similarly, when it comes to FMCG, building brands is not very easy. For example, the brands that we acquired from Heinz, the 50-year plus brands. Talk of Nissin, talk of Complan. I'm a Complan boy, I'm a Complan girl. These are still in our years and memory. Because of that nature of brand building, which takes years to establish, I think it always remain very attractive and valuation wise. If you say costly, yes, costly.
Again, coming back to the deal making environment and the pharma valuation. So last 5-7 years, if I can be a little more harsh, pharma companies have not attracted, leave aside the last 6 months, so large pharma companies have not attracted great valuations. So they were not flavor of the season. And if you will see last 6 months, things are turning and the pharma index has performed better than the peer set, so which is a classic defensive characteristics. Do you think this is just the beginning of a big up move in pharma as an industry? And given the fact that, so would you feel that there will be a lot of M&A interest and private equity and investment interest, because we get a lot of private equity players who are keen to finance and fund good quality M&A private pharmaceutical companies? Do you think that trend would accelerate?
So first of all, pharma industry is in India before a few years, let's say till about 2017 or so, the valuations were quite attractive, companies were doing well. The companies actually continue to do well. What has happened then, when channel consolidation took place in US, where the large wholesalers started commanding 85 to 90% kind of markets, that channel consolidation led to little more than normal price erosion for most pharma products. It is 15 to 20% kind of price erosion once, depending on the products we're operating, compared to normally 5-6% kind of single-digit price erosion, which normally happened to be there earlier too. So that created a kind of a little dampening impact in terms of so-called future of pharma as envisaged by some people. The other problem which happened simultaneously was that with GDUFA 2 coming into existence, the product approval timelines came down, which means that the supply in terms of US market became intense. So there was a supply side competition. Other side, channel consolidation gave demand side bargaining power to customers, and supply side becoming weak. These two factors together led to some erosion in terms of higher erosion of prices again, and little lower profitability of US pharma market. Now that impact then was further aggravated by certain actions by US FDA in terms of manufacturing facilities of many Indian companies. So these three factors coming together created a kind of mindset that, whereas earlier people were talking that if you are in US you are good, some people started talking that if you are in US you are no good. So it's a matter of time. Now I think people have been again becoming more realistic and looking at the overall scene, that the people are again coming out of their free actions in a gradual fashion. It's again a matter of time. All large pharma companies, I can pretty much tell on their behalf that they are all very much committed in terms of quality systems and would some come out of whatever actions they have. And I'm quite hopeful about the future of pharma industry there.
Because sir, it is a very surprising that pharma market cap is less than 3% of the Indian the market cap of the whole uh, the stock markets, which is quite a surprise. But I'm sure that changed. So some of the questions which have been sent to me, and I'll just address them to you. And I'll just repeat. So they say that there is a huge difference in number of ANDA filings for a given R&D expenditure amongst different companies. And the question is, why is that so? What leads to such huge difference in R&D productivity? The question which I understood was that whether between various different companies filing for ANDAs, their cost is very, very significantly different for the same number of ANDAs. So is R&D not very efficient in India, or there is a huge divergence in their productivity?
So R&D spend, when you look at the number and when you look at the products filed, there are two explanations which can be given for this phenomenon. One is that in a particular year, when you file product, the product development might have started in the previous year, and the filing might have just happened, let's say, during the current year. And similarly, there would be spend in the current year for the products which are yet to be filed, maybe in the next year. And therefore, depending on how many work in progress is like opening stock plus new closing stock and difference. So you can at a point of time will find that different companies will have different such numbers. But if you take a longer period, let's say you take 4 or 5 years period, then ideally this would get ironed out. So that's the one side. The second is what type of products you are taking for development. There could be products where the requirements in terms of the bio studies or requirement in terms of any further additional studies could be bare minimum. Whereas there could be certain products where the products are difficult to manufacture, they are technically very difficult, where there samples what we call R&D themselves are very costly. Talk about, for example, biosimilar products, compared to normal oral solids, they would be costly. And the different stages, therefore, where the product has to go through, those things also determine. So the kind of products that you select also has a say in terms of the spend. So it's not a one size fits all, so it can't be generalized that way.
I gather your point, sir. So one of the favorite question, and there are many of my investment banker colleagues are on the call, and they always ask us to ask this question: is Zydus looking at a certain kind of opportunities? Are you looking? And if yes, what would be your wish list if you want to buy or invest in some companies? Are it? And I don't know whether you can answer that given the sensitivity of that question. But if you can, and is there a wish list of a potential acquisition that you may have in your mind, sir?
So, Rajiv, you're right. Anything which makes sense and which will give help in terms of strategy, we are there to buy. But there is nothing very specific. Having said so, compared to generics, the interest would be more in terms of specialty.
Specialty. So again, given that we made a huge investment in FMCG, and FMCG industry as such, pre-pandemic, pre-COVID, was witnessing a slowdown in terms of volume. So there was a feeling that FMCG is slowing down. I do not know the figures during the pandemic, but do you see that trend continuing? And given that there is a significant impact on the whole economy, do you think there would be some impact on FMCG brands also going forward? I mean, revenue volumes?
I believe during pandemic, yes, there is an impact. And if you now compare FMCG versus pharma, then obviously pharma is relatively much less impacted as compared to FMCG. But wherever the question within FMCG is that, is it more of a discretionary spend that you have? Obviously, discretionary spend is first to be hit during this pandemic. with the kind of issues arising, including somewhere employment issues. If you talk at a national or global level, where people would like to save rather than spend, and when that choice comes that whether you would like to spend, obviously the necessities would outweigh in terms of priority compared to something which is more of a discretionary or luxury. But I think this is a difficult phase, and hopefully we are passing through this stage very soon. Now lockdown getting open in a gradual fashion, things would be all right, and therefore while there has been a temporary setback, I don't think that anything has changed in terms of the prospects of FMCG industry for times to come. Remain very attractive.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I'm conscious of the time that we have a hard stop in next 3 minutes.
Another 5 minutes, yes.
Another 5 minutes. So you have a board meeting to attend to. Sir, one or two questions which are more broader. Sir, while on one side I understood that we have, and all Indian companies have a significant dependence on US market. At the same time, we see in US saying that we will take manufacturing back home and there will be a deglobalization. We would prefer that whatever we are producing is produced in US. While it may be a rhetorical thing for US, but eventually will that lead to some sort of a disruption for Indian pharmaceutical companies?
I don't see any kind of major impact of that, because even if, let's say, US wants to produce certain drugs locally, it will be restricted to few items where they consider that these are absolutely essential and they wouldn't like to be dependent on any other country. And they obviously need to give a lot of incentives to local manufacturers, including whatever incentives they have to give or subsidy they have to give, to see that they remain competitive, for those products. As far as the overall impact of such movies concerned, I think that even US will need to balance this self-reliance objective versus the economically what makes sense. Because if you create an economy which is self-reliant but economically quite incompetent, compared to world standards, it's not allowing to efficient factors of production to play their magic. And I think in open economy and capitalized economy like US, while the self-reliance on certain things can be understood, I don't think it can be generalized that all the products, for example, would start getting produced there. It's not going to happen.
Oh, sir, I can understand that. I think, sir, I think this is a good. So last question. I mean, we have a good animal health business, and somehow animal health business has remained a poor cousin of the human business. So any thoughts on the growth potential and how you are taking that as a seed business, given that recent transactions have happened in the animal health space?
No, we are very confident in terms of growth potential of animal health business. We are the second largest in India in terms of animal health, and continue to grow. It's very, very profitable business, and has a lot of potential for growth.
Wonderful. So any other thoughts you would prefer to share with us? I think we have last 1 or 2 minutes with us. Any thoughts which you believe, any parting comments that you may have about how you see the situation playing out? And
so I think the pandemic has taught us, working differently, working from home, using technology. I think some of these lessons are going to be useful for us, including the need of travel, especially traveling abroad. How do you achieve the objectives even without, traveling or having a personal visit? Some of us have also found a real need of, looking at things in a much controlled manner. For example, we created a liquidity management office to look at every day's, inflows, outflows. Has given better insights. I think most pharma companies have been in a fortunate position, not having any kind of liquidity, crisis. They've been able to do better business in terms of managing working capital. But it has certainly given us opportunity to look at things in a much more, dynamic manner, to run various scenarios, both for revenue, cost, and profit, as well as from cash flow angle. There have been requirements, let's say, from association of pharmaceutical drug chemist in terms of extended credit in the past, and to see how does it work out. So these things have given us little more visibility in terms of things which work, things which don't work, and how do you manage these difficult times which once in a century comes. But fortunately, we were able to handle this, extremely well, and I must say that I am lucky enough to be part of pharmaceutical industry, which is considered essential.
So I think you are lucky, sir, given that it is quite a defensive and it is rebounding in the manner which I think most industries are finding it difficult. I think that's a quite interesting comment. Thank you, sir. I am conscious of the hard stop that we have, sir, and I think we with that. So I must thank you and appreciate you for taking time off to speak to us and sharing your insights, sir. I think on behalf of all my colleagues, I thank you for your time and looking forward to meeting you in person sometimes.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me once again.
Thank you, sir.